Well, hello everyone, and happy Friday. I hope you've all had a great week so far. Today's devotional is a short one, and the title for it today is admittedly a little odd, but I'll explain. It's Giving Thanks Inside a Fish. Giving Thanks Inside a Fish. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 18, the Apostle Paul tells us to give thanks, he writes, in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. And I think probably for most of us, we would prefer that he had written in some circumstances, or in most circumstances, or even just in good circumstances, give thanks. But that's not what it says. It says in all circumstances, we are to be grateful, to be thankful, in all circumstances, to give thanks. Having said that, the story of Jonah in the Old Testament is probably one of the most familiar stories in the whole Bible, a story of a runaway prophet who gets swallowed by a huge fish. Eventually he's spit out, and then he goes on a mission trip of sorts to Nineveh. But what is probably a little less known about the story is what happens to Jonah while he's in the belly of the great fish. Having reached the very end of his rope, Jonah cries out to the Lord, and in chapter 2, verse 9, it says, "But I," Jonah says, "with the voice of thanksgiving will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed I will pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord." A couple of very obvious observations about Jonah's situation at this point is that, first of all, he was in a really bad circumstance. About as bad a circumstance as you could imagine. He's in the belly of a great fish underwater. But in that moment, as he repented, as he turned back to the Lord, Jonah was thankful inside a fish. And then secondly, I think it's important to note that Jonah didn't know at this point how the end of his story would go, kind of like we do. He gives thanks in verse 9, but he has no idea yet that verse 10 is even coming, where it says, "And the Lord spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah out upon the dry land." Jonah didn't know that that was how his story was going to go, but he gives thanks inside a fish. Jonah was in a very bad situation, but he knew that his God, our God, is very good, always good. And because of that, he could, like Paul tells us, give thanks in all circumstances. And certainly we can as well. If Jonah could give thanks inside a fish, then surely we can give thanks inside our homes, or even in the midst of great trial or trouble, or whatever circumstance you find yourself in today. We can, as Paul says, give thanks in all circumstances. For this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you and for me. I pray the Lord will help us to be thankful always. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. God bless you.